That was the first thing Detective Maria Rothschild noticed when she stepped into the modest, two-story colonial on Elm Street that Friday morning in October. The second thing she noticed was the smell, not of death, but of expensive perfume mixed with something metallic and sharp. The third thing was the wedding photo on the hallway wall, slightly crooked, showing a blonde woman in white lace smiling next to a stocky man with kind eyes. In the photograph, they looked like any other couple celebrating the happiest day of their lives. But the bathroom told a different story. The blood formed a constellation of droplets leading from the sink to the bathtub. And in the center of it all lay a discarded syringe, an empty testosterone vial, and a driver's license that didn't match the name on the mortgage documents. 3 days earlier, Marcus Holloway had walked into the house he'd shared with his wife for 7 years and felt something shift in the air. He couldn't name it at first, just a subtle wrongness that made his skin prickle. The house was too quiet. Lauren usually had music playing when she got home from her nursing shifts at County General, something upbeat and mindless that she'd hum along to while making dinner. But today there was only silence, thick and oppressive, broken only by the drip of a faucet somewhere upstairs. Marcus set his briefcase down by the door, loosening his tie as he called out, "Lauren, you home, babe?" No answer. He moved through the living room past the couch where they'd spent countless evenings watching crime documentaries, Lauren's favorite, though Marcus always found them too disturbing, and toward the kitchen. The mail sat unopened on the counter, which was unusual. Lauren always went through the mail immediately, organizing bills into neat piles, recycling junk, setting aside anything important. It was one of her quirks, part of the meticulous order she maintained in every aspect of their life together. That's when he noticed the basement door was open, just a crack, but enough to send a sliver of artificial light climbing the kitchen wall. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. They never used the basement. It was unfinished, full of boxes from their move 7 years ago, things neither of them had bothered to unpack because they weren't important enough to integrate into their new life. The washer and dryer were down there, but Lauren always did laundry on Sundays, and today was Thursday. He approached the door slowly, some primal instinct telling him that what waited below would change everything. His hand found the doorknob, cold brass against his palm, and he pulled it open wider. The stairs descended into harsh fluorescent light, and he could hear something. Now movement, the scrape of cardboard against concrete, someone going through boxes. Lauren. The movement stopped for 3 heartbeats. There was absolute silence. Then her voice floated up from below, tight and strange. "Marcus, don't come down. Please." But he was already descending, his feet moving before his brain could process the fear in her tone. When he reached the bottom step, he saw her standing in the far corner near the old boiler, surrounded by open boxes, papers scattered around her feet like autumn leaves. She was holding something in her hands, a photograph, though he couldn't see what it showed from where he stood. Her face was pale, mascara smudged beneath her eyes as if she'd been crying. Her blonde hair, usually styled in perfect waves, hung limp around her shoulders. "What's wrong?" Marcus moved toward her, concern overriding the strange unease in his gut. "Did something happen?" Lauren looked at him then, and he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Terror. Pure animal terror, mixed with something else. Resignation maybe, or relief. She held out the photograph to him, her hand trembling. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you everything." Marcus took the photograph. It showed a teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, with short, dark hair and sharp features. The boy was thin, angular, wearing a football jersey too big for his frame. He was smiling, but it looked forced. like someone had told him to look happy for the camera. Marcus studied the photo, trying to understand what about this stranger had upset his wife so badly. "I don't understand," he said. "Who is this?" Lauren's face crumpled. She pressed her hands against her mouth, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might collapse. When she finally spoke, her words came out strangled and broken. "That's me, Marcus. That's me 20 years ago." The photograph slipped from his fingers. It took several seconds for his brain to process what she'd said, and even then it didn't make sense. He looked from the photo on the floor back to his wife. His beautiful wife with her delicate features and feminine curves. The woman he'd fallen in love with at a hospital charity gala 7 years ago. The woman he'd married 6 months later in a ceremony, attended by both their families. "What do you mean?" His voice sounded distant to his own ears. Lauren sank down onto one of the boxes, her whole body shaking. "My birth name was Lawrence," she said. "Lawrence Daniel Holcomb. I was born male Marcus. I transitioned when I was 23 after I moved away from my hometown. I changed everything. My name, my records, my entire history. I thought I could leave it all behind. I thought I could just be the person I was always meant to be." Marcus felt the basement tilt around him. He reached out to steady himself against the concrete wall, its rough surface grounding him even as his world came apart. "You're telling me you're trans, that you were born, that he couldn't finish the sentence." His mind was racing, trying to reconcile the information with everything he knew, everything he believed about his life. "I should have told you before we got married," Lauren said, tears streaming down her face now. "I know that. I knew it then. But I was so scared, Marcus. I was so scared of losing you. And as time went on, it got harder and harder to find the right moment. And then we'd been together for 2 years, 3 years. And how do you tell someone something like that after so long? How do you admit you've been lying every single day?" Marcus's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the basement steps, his mind struggling to process the revelation. 7 years. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of intimacy and shared dreams and planning for a future together. 7 years built on a foundation of what? Deception, love, both. "Did you ever love me?" he heard himself ask. "Or was this whole thing just what? An experiment? A way to prove you could pass as a real woman?" Lauren flinched at his words, at the way he said real woman, like it was something she could never be. "I've always loved you," she said fiercely. "From the first moment I saw you at that gala talking about your work with homeless shelters, trying so hard to make a difference. I loved your kindness and your big heart. I loved that you saw me, really saw me, not just as a pretty face, but as a person. Loving you was never a lie, Marcus. It was the most honest thing I've ever done." He wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe her. But the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. Every memory they'd shared now felt tainted, filtered through this new lens of truth. Their first date at the Italian restaurant downtown, the weekend they'd spent at the cabin in Vermont, the night he'd proposed on the beach at sunset. Had any of it been real, or had he been in love with an illusion, a carefully constructed persona designed to hide the truth? "I need to get out of here," Marcus said, standing up abruptly. The basement suddenly felt suffocating, the walls pressing in. "I need to think." "Marcus, please." Lauren reached for him, but he pulled away, unable to bear her touch right now. "Don't," he said. "Just don't." He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs, behind him. He heard Lauren calling his name, but he didn't stop. He grabbed his car keys from the hook by the door and left. The sound of the front door slamming, echoing through the quiet neighborhood like a gunshot. Marcus drove with no destination in mind, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The October sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that felt too beautiful for what he was feeling. He ended up at a dive bar on the outskirts of town, a place he'd never been to before, where no one would know him. He ordered whiskey and sat in a corner booth staring at his phone. He had photos on his phone, hundreds of them. Lauren at the beach, Lauren laughing at one of his stupid jokes. Lauren asleep on the couch on a Sunday afternoon. Lauren in her wedding dress, radiant and perfect. He scrolled through them, trying to find some sign that he'd missed, some clue that should have told him the truth. But there was nothing. She was exactly what she appeared to be. A woman. His wife. The person he loved more than anyone in the world. Except she wasn't what she appeared to be. Or was she? Marcus didn't know anymore. His understanding of reality had shattered, and he didn't know how to pick up the pieces. He was on his third whiskey when his phone rang. It was Jake, his best friend since college, probably calling about their weekend golf plans. Marcus almost didn't answer, but some part of him needed to talk to someone. Anyone who existed outside the nightmare his life had become. "Hey, man." Jake's voice was cheerful, oblivious. "Just confirming Saturday morning. You still good for 7, Jake?" Marcus said, and something in his voice must have conveyed his state because Jake's tone immediately shifted. "What's wrong? What happened?" Marcus opened his mouth to tell him to say the words out loud, to make this horrible new reality concrete, but he couldn't. "How? Did you tell someone that your wife wasn't who you thought she was? That your entire marriage was built on a lie? That the person you'd been intimate with, the person you'd shared your deepest self with, had been keeping a secret so fundamental that it changed the very nature of your relationship?" "Lauren and I had a fight," he said instead. "Bad one." Jake sighed. "Man, I'm sorry. You want to talk about it? Want me to come meet you somewhere?" "No," Marcus said quickly. "No, I just need to process it on my own." They talked for a few more minutes, Jake offering the kind of generic relationship advice that people give when they don't know the full story. When Marcus hung up, he felt more alone than ever. He couldn't talk to Jake about this. He couldn't talk to anyone. The shame of it, the confusion, the sense of betrayal, it was too much to articulate. He thought about his parents, conservative Christians who still believed marriage was between one man and one woman, who'd made their views on transgender people painfully clear over Sunday dinners. They'd loved Lauren, thought she was perfect for their son. What would they say if they knew? Would they tell him to get an annulment? Would they see his marriage as invalid, a mockery of the sacrament they held so dear? And what about Lauren's family? He'd met her parents twice, her mother, a quiet woman who barely spoke. Her father, absent, explained away as having died when Lauren was young. He'd met a cousin once at the wedding, a woman named Sarah, who'd seemed uncomfortable the entire time. Had they known? Had everyone known except him? The bartender was giving him concerned looks, so Marcus paid his tab and left. He drove around for another hour, eventually finding himself in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner. He ordered coffee and pie he couldn't eat, sitting by the window, watching cars pass on the highway, people living their normal lives, unaware that somewhere a man's world was falling apart. It was past midnight when he finally pulled into his driveway. The house was dark except for a single light in the bedroom window. He sat in the car for a long moment, gathering the courage to go inside. He had to talk to her, had to understand, had to figure out what this meant for their future. If they even had a future. Lauren was sitting on their bed when he entered the bedroom, still wearing the same clothes from earlier. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she looked small and fragile in a way he'd never seen before. When she saw him, she stood up quickly, hope and fear warring on her face. "You came back," she said. "This is my house," Marcus replied, and immediately regretted the coldness in his tone. He sat down in the chair by the window, putting distance between them. "I have questions." "Okay," Lauren said, sitting back down on the bed. "I'll tell you anything you want to know." "When did you transition?" "You said you were 23. She nodded. "I started hormone therapy at 23. Got my first surgeries at 25. I'd known since I was a child that I was different, that something was wrong. But I grew up in a small town in Georgia where being different wasn't acceptable, so I hid it, tried to be what everyone expected. I even dated girls in high school, trying to force myself to be normal. But after college, after I moved away, I finally admitted the truth to myself. Marcus processed this, trying to imagine the person in that photograph becoming the woman before him. What about your family? Do they know? My father kicked me out when I came out to him, Lauren said quietly. Said I was an abomination, that I was no longer his son. My mother, she tried to keep in touch for a while, but it was too hard for her. The cousin you met at our wedding, Sarah, she's the only one who accepted me, the only one who stood by me. So when you told me your father was dead, he is to me, Lauren said firmly. The day he told me to leave and never come back, he died. I don't owe him anything, including the truth about his existence. Marcus rubbed his face, exhaustion and alcohol making his head pound. What about medical stuff? Did you have bottom surgery? Lauren's face flushed, but she answered, yes, when I was 27. That's why I said I couldn't have biological children. Not because of the endometriosis I told you about, but because I was born without a uterus. Everything else I told you about wanting to adopt was true. I've always wanted to be a mother. The casual mention of motherhood sent a spike of anger through Marcus. How can you talk about being a mother when you can't even be honest about who you are? What kind of parent lies to their husband for 7 years? I know you're angry, Lauren said, tears starting again. I know I should have told you, but Marcus, try to understand. When you've spent your whole life being rejected, being told you're wrong and broken and perverted, it changes you. It makes you afraid of losing the good things when you finally find them. I was terrified that if I told you, you'd look at me differently, that you'd stop seeing Lauren and only see Lawrence, that I'd lose the only real love I'd ever known. You don't get to make that choice for me, Marcus said, his voice rising. You don't get to decide what information I need to know about the person I'm married to. That's not love, Lauren. That's manipulation. You're right, she said, her voice breaking. You're absolutely right. I manipulated you by not telling you, and I can never take that back. I can never undo the hurt I've caused. But Marcus, everything else was real. My love for you, our life together, the person I am with you. That's all real. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm finally being exactly who I am, who I was always meant to be. Marcus stood up, pacing the room. I don't even know what to think right now. I don't know if I can trust anything you say. How do I know there aren't other secrets? Other lies you've told yourself are okay because they protect what we have. There's nothing else, Lauren said desperately. I swear to you, there's nothing else. I've told you everything. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the closet. I'm sleeping in the guest room. I can't be in here with you right now. He left before she could respond, closing the door on her soft sobs. In the guest room, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind churning through everything he'd learned. He thought about their sex life, which had always been good. Lauren was passionate and responsive, and he'd never had any reason to question her anatomy or her authenticity as a woman. Modern surgery was apparently more advanced than he'd realized. He thought about the small things he'd noticed over the years that might have been clues. The way she was always self-conscious about getting undressed with the lights on, though he'd attributed that to normal body image issues. The fact that she never wanted to go swimming, claiming she hated how chlorine affected her hair. The old photograph, she said, had been destroyed in a house fire, leaving her with no pictures from her childhood or teenage years. All of it made sense now. Pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving. Around 3:00 in the morning, exhaustion finally dragged him into fitful sleep. He dreamed of strangers wearing his wife's face, of searching through endless hallways for something he'd lost but couldn't name. He woke to pale morning light filtering through the curtains and the smell of coffee brewing downstairs. For a blissful moment, he forgot everything that had happened. Then reality crashed back and he felt sick all over again. When he went downstairs, Lauren was in the kitchen making breakfast like it was any other Saturday morning. She'd showered and changed, put on makeup to hide the evidence of her crying. She looked up when he entered, her expression guarded and hopeful at the same time. I made your favorite, she said quietly, gesturing to the pancakes and bacon on the stove. And coffee strong the way you like it. Marcus poured himself a cup, not trusting himself to speak yet. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the comfort of 7 years of domesticity warring with the strangeness of this new reality. I called in sick to work, Lawrence said. I thought we should talk more if you want to. Marcus sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten thousands of meals together, where they'd paid bills and made plans and lived their ordinary life. I don't know what to say to you, he admitted. I'm so angry, but I'm also, I don't know, confused, hurt. Lauren sat down across from him, her hands wrapped around her own coffee mug like she was trying to draw warmth from it. Can I ask you something? If I had told you on our first date that I was trans, would you have gone on a second date? Marcus opened his mouth to say yes. Of course he would have. But he stopped really thinking about it. 7 years ago he'd been different, less worldly, more sheltered. He'd grown up in a conservative household, had absorbed certain beliefs about gender and sexuality without questioning them. If Lauren had revealed her history that first night, would he have given her a chance? Or would he have politely ended the date early and never called again? I don't know, he said honestly. I'd like to think I would have, but I don't know. That's why I didn't tell you, Lauren said. Because I knew I could see in the way you talked about your family, your background, that you might not be able to see past it. And I wanted so badly for you to see me, just me, without all the baggage of my past coloring your perception. But that baggage is part of who you are, Marcus argued. You can't just erase your history because it's inconvenient. I wasn't trying to erase it, Lauren said. I was trying to move beyond it. There's a difference. Every transperson has to make choices about disclosure, about who gets to know their history and who doesn't. It's not deception. It's privacy. It's protection. Do you tell everyone you meet about every difficult thing you've ever been through? Every trauma, every struggle? Marcus thought about his own secrets. The depression he'd battled in his 20s, the alcoholic father he rarely mentioned, the assault by an older cousin when he was 12 that he'd never told anyone about. Everyone had things they kept private, parts of themselves they shared selectively. Was Lauren's transition really different from that? But it felt different. It felt like it should have been shared between husband and wife. Like it was information he had a right to know before making a lifetime commitment. Marriage is supposed to be different, he said. There's supposed to be complete honesty between spouses. No secrets. And yet you never told me about Kyle, Lawrence said quietly. Marcus felt his stomach drop. How do you know about Kyle? I found the letters in your office last year when I was looking for our tax documents. Letters from your cousin Kyle from prison begging you to visit him, apologizing for something he did to you when you were kids. Lauren's eyes were gentle but firm. You never mentioned having a cousin in prison. You never told me what he did to you. I respected your privacy and didn't bring it up because I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. Was I wrong to do that? Should I have confronted you and demanded to know every painful detail of your past? Marcus felt heat flood his face. She was right. He'd kept that secret for years, unable to even say the words out loud to his wife. Kyle had been convicted of assault on another minor, and the letters had started arriving 3 years ago. Marcus had read the first one. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm getting help. I found God and then locked the rest away unread. He'd never wanted to think about that summer at his grandmother's house, about Kyle's hands and the shame that had burned through him afterward. That's not the same thing, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Lauren asked. We've both kept painful parts of our past private. The difference is that my past is visible in a way yours isn't. Society says I have an obligation to disclose, Kyle, my medical history because I'm trans, but you don't have the same obligation around your trauma. Why? Because one is about gender and the other is about abuse. They're both deeply personal. They're both things that shaped us but don't define us. Marcus had no answer for that. He stared into his coffee, watching the light brown surface ripple with his breath. Everything she was saying made a twisted kind of sense, but he still felt betrayed. He still felt like their marriage had been built on a foundation of lies, no matter how she justified it. "I need time," he finally said. "I need time to process this, to figure out how I feel about everything." "Okay," Lauren said. She looked relieved that he wasn't leaving immediately, wasn't calling a lawyer or packing his bags. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." But time didn't help. Over the next few days, Marcus went through the motions of normal life while his internal world remained in chaos. He went to work at the nonprofit where he managed community outreach programs, sat through meetings, responded to emails, all while feeling like he was watching himself from a distance. At home, he and Lauren existed in a state of painful politeness, navigating around each other like strangers. Marcus found himself researching transgender issues, obsessively in the privacy of his office, reading articles in forums and first-person accounts. He learned about the medical process of transition, about the discrimination and violence trans people faced, about the high rates of suicide and homelessness in the community. He read about trans people who'd been in relationships like his, whose partners had either accepted them or left them. The outcomes were mixed, and none of it gave him clarity. He also found himself watching Lauren differently, cataloging her movements and mannerisms, looking for traces of masculinity he might have missed. But there was nothing. She was simply Lauren, his wife, the woman he'd loved for 7 years. Her laugh, her way of humming while she cooked, the little wrinkle between her eyebrows when she was concentrating. None of that had changed. Only his perception had changed. On Wednesday evening, 5 days after the revelation, Marcus was working late at the office when his phone rang. It was Lauren, and she sounded strange, her voice tight and scared in a way that sent alarm bells ringing in his head. "Marcus, I need you to come home right now." "What's wrong? Are you okay? Just come home, please." He made it home in record time, his heart pounding with fear. When he burst through the door, he found Lauren standing in the middle of the living room, holding her phone with trembling hands. The television was on, muted, showing some local news broadcast. "What happened?" Marcus demanded. Lauren turned the TV volume up. A news anchor was speaking over footage of a house Marcus didn't recognize. A small, ranch-style home with police tape stretched across the front yard. Body was discovered this morning by a neighbor who noticed the smell. Police have identified the victim as Sarah Holcomb, age 35, of Monroe County. The cause of death has not yet been released, but sources say investigators are treating this as a homicide. Anyone with information is asked to contact. Lauren switched off the TV, her face ashen. "That's my cousin Sarah, the one who came to our wedding. Someone killed her." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Jesus, do they know who did it? "No," Lauren said. She was shaking now, and Marcus instinctively moved to put his arm around her, his anger momentarily forgotten in the face of her grief. "But Marcus, she called me 2 days ago. She said someone had been asking questions about me, about my past. A man," she said. Over the next few days, Marcus went through the motions of normal life while his internal world remained in chaos. He went to work at the nonprofit where he managed community outreach programs, sat through meetings, responded to emails, all while feeling like he was watching himself from a distance. At home, he and Lauren existed in a state of painful politeness, navigating around each other like strangers. Marcus found himself researching transgender issues, obsessively in the privacy of his office, reading articles in forums and first-person accounts. He learned about the medical process of transition, about the discrimination and violence trans people faced, about the high rates of suicide and homelessness in the community. He read about trans people who'd been in relationships like his, whose partners had either accepted them or left them. The outcomes were mixed, and none of it gave him clarity. He also found himself watching Lauren differently, cataloging her movements and mannerisms, looking for traces of masculinity he might have missed. But there was nothing. She was simply Lauren, his wife, the woman he'd loved for 7 years. Her laugh, her way of humming while she cooked, the little wrinkle between her eyebrows when she was concentrating. None of that had changed. Only his perception had changed. On Wednesday evening, 5 days after the revelation, Marcus was working late at the office when his phone rang. It was Lauren, and she sounded strange, her voice tight and scared in a way that sent alarm bells ringing in his head. "Marcus, I need you to come home right now." "What's wrong? Are you okay? Just come home, please." He made it home in record time, his heart pounding with fear. When he burst through the door, he found Lauren standing in the middle of the living room, holding her phone with trembling hands. The television was on, muted, showing some local news broadcast. "What happened?" Marcus demanded. Lauren turned the TV volume up. A news anchor was speaking over footage of a house Marcus didn't recognize. A small, ranch-style home with police tape stretched across the front yard. Body was discovered this morning by a neighbor who noticed the smell. Police have identified the victim as Sarah Holcomb, age 35, of Monroe County. The cause of death has not yet been released, but sources say investigators are treating this as a homicide. Anyone with information is asked to contact. Lauren switched off the TV, her face ashen. "That's my cousin Sarah, the one who came to our wedding. Someone killed her." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Jesus, do they know who did it? "No," Lauren said. She was shaking now, and Marcus instinctively moved to put his arm around her, his anger momentarily forgotten in the face of her grief. "But Marcus, she called me 2 days ago. She said someone had been asking questions about me, about my past. A man, she said. She didn't know who he was, but he'd shown up at her workplace claiming to be an old friend of the family." "Did she say what he wanted?" "Information about me, about my transition, about where I live now." Lauren looked up at him, terror in her eyes. "I told her not to tell him anything. I told her it was probably just some reporter digging for a story, that it would blow over. But what if it wasn't? What if whoever killed her is coming for me next?" Marcus felt his blood run cold. "We need to call the police." They spent the next 3 hours at the police station giving statements to a detective, Rothschild, who looked tired and skeptical in equal measure. Lauren explained about the phone call from Sarah, about the mysterious man asking questions. Marcus corroborated what he could, though he felt useless. He'd never met Sarah beyond that one time at the wedding. Had no information that could help. When they finally left the station, it was nearly midnight. In the car, Lauren was silent, staring out the window at the dark streets passing by. Marcus reached over and took her hand, surprising himself. Whatever was happening between them personally, someone had murdered her cousin and she needed support. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "About Sarah, I know you two were close." Lauren squeezed his hand but didn't speak. When they got home, she went straight upstairs. Marcus heard the shower running for a long time, and when she finally came out, her eyes were red again. That night, Marcus slept in their bedroom for the first time since the revelation. Not because everything was okay, but because Lauren was scared and grieving, and it felt wrong to leave her alone. They lay on opposite sides of the bed, not touching, the space between them vast, and charged with everything unsaid. Marcus was almost asleep when Lauren spoke into the darkness. "Do you think he knows whoever killed Sarah? Knows what about me? About who I used to be? Do you think that's why he killed her? Because she wouldn't tell him what he wanted to know?" Marcus had been wondering the same thing, but hadn't wanted to voice it. "I don't know. The police will figure it out. I've spent my whole life being afraid," Lauren said, her voice small and distant. "Afraid of being found out, afraid of being rejected, afraid of violence. Do you know how many trans women are murdered every year? The statistics are horrifying. I thought I'd finally made it, that I'd found safety in this life we built together. But maybe there's no such thing as safety for people like me." "Don't say that," Marcus said, though he didn't know what else to offer. What comfort could he give when the world really was dangerous for her in ways it had never been for him? Over the next week, the investigation into Sarah's murder progressed slowly. Detective Rothschild called several times to ask Lauren questions about Sarah's life, her associates, anyone who might have wanted to harm her. But Sarah had been a quiet person with a small circle of friends and a job at a library. There was no obvious motive, no clear suspects. Then on Friday afternoon, Rothschild called with news. They'd found DNA at the crime scene that matched a man in the criminal database, a name that made Lauren go pale when she heard it. Thomas Keating, she said after hanging up. She looked at Marcus with horror in her eyes. I went to high school with him. He was obsessed with me back then when I was still Lawrence. Marcus felt dread settle in his stomach. Obsessed how? He used to follow me around, leave notes in my locker, show up places he knew I'd be. It was before I'd even admitted to myself that I was trans. Back when I was trying so hard to be a normal boy. I thought maybe if I just ignored him, he'd leave me alone, but he kept escalating. He cornered me in the locker room once, tried to. Lauren trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself. Coach walked in before anything happened. Thomas got suspended. I thought that was the end of it. Did you report it to the police back then? My father said reporting it would make things worse. That people would think I was gay if I admitted another boy had tried something with me. He made me promise to keep quiet about it. Lauren's voice was bitter. Keeping quiet, that was always the answer. Don't make waves. Don't draw attention. Just suffer in silence and hope the problem goes away. Detective Rothschild came to their house that evening with more information. Thomas Keating had been released from prison 6 months ago after serving time for assault. He'd apparently become fixated on finding Lauren again. Had tracked down Sarah through old school records and Facebook. Had been stalking Sarah for weeks trying to get information about Lauren's whereabouts. Sarah was very protective of your privacy, Rothschild told Lauren. According to her phone records, she called several friends in the days before her death, asking them what they'd do if someone was harassing them for information. She never gave you up. We think he killed her in frustration when she wouldn't cooperate. Lauren broke down then, sobbing so hard Marcus thought she might be sick. He held her while Rothschild looked on with professional sympathy. We have units watching your house, the detective said, and we're actively looking for Keating. He didn't leave much of a trail after his prison release, but we'll find him. In the meantime, I need you to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Keep your doors locked. Vary your routines. After Rothschild left, Marcus double-checked all the locks and windows while Lauren sat on the couch in a daze. When he sat down next to her, she leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her without thinking about all the complicated feelings still unresolved between them. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry Sarah died because of me. I'm sorry I brought danger into your life. I'm sorry for all of it. This isn't your fault, Marcus said firmly. Thomas Keating is a psychopath. None of this is on you. But Lawrence shook her head. If I'd just stayed Lawrence, if I'd never transitioned, never tried to be someone else, Sarah would still be alive. You wouldn't be in danger. Everything would be simpler. Marcus pulled back to look at her. You can't seriously be saying you regret transitioning. I regret the pain it's caused everyone around me, Lauren said. My father, my mother, you, Sarah. Maybe they were all right. Maybe I should have just learned to live with the body I was born in instead of being selfish enough to demand the world see me differently. That's the grief talking, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure if he believed his own words. You have every right to be who you are, do I? Lauren looked at him with devastated eyes. Or is that just something we tell ourselves to feel better about disrupting everyone else's lives? My existence as Lauren has done nothing but cause problems. Marcus didn't know how to respond to that. Part of him, the part still angry and hurt by her deception, wanted to agree, wanted to say that yes, maybe it would have been easier if she'd never transitioned, never come into his life at all. But another part of him, deeper and more honest, couldn't imagine his life without her. Couldn't imagine never having known the woman who'd made him laugh on their first date, who'd held his hand through his mother's cancer scare, who'd danced with him in the kitchen on random Tuesday nights just because. I don't have the answer, he finally said. But I know that Sarah would want you to stay safe. And I know that giving up on being yourself isn't going to bring her back. They sat together in silence for a long time, the weight of everything pressing down on them. Outside, night fell over the neighborhood. And somewhere out there, Thomas Keating was hunting. The police found Keating 3 days later. He'd been staying in a motel 40 miles away, had a car full of surveillance equipment and photos. Dozens of photos of Lauren taken from a distance over the past weeks. Pictures of her leaving for work, shopping at the grocery store, walking through their neighborhood. He'd been watching them, planning something. The police wouldn't tell them what weapons or tools they'd found in his car, but the grim look on Rothschild's face when she briefed them suggested it had been bad. Keating was charged with Sarah's murder, with stalking, with possession of weapons. The prosecutor said it was a solid case, that he'd likely spend the rest of his life in prison. It should have felt like closure, like safety restored, but Marcus could see that something in Lauren had broken. She'd become withdrawn, barely speaking, going through her nursing shifts like a zombie. At home, she spent hours in the basement going through old boxes, organizing and reorganizing her past. 2 weeks after Keating's arrest, Marcus came home from work to find Lauren sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her. When he got closer, he saw they were divorce documents already filled out with her information. "What is this?" His voice came out strangled. Lauren looked up at him with hollow eyes. "It's what you want, isn't it? You've been sleeping in the guest room again. You can barely look at me. You deserve to have a life with someone who doesn't come with all this baggage, all this danger." Marcus stared at the papers, at his name in the respondent field waiting to be signed. Was this what he wanted? He'd been so sure of his anger, his sense of betrayal. But these past weeks, watching Lauren grieve and suffer and shrink into herself had complicated things. He'd held her when she cried about Sarah. He'd made her favorite meals when she wouldn't eat. He'd checked the locks at night and kept watch while she slept, making sure no other monsters could hurt her. He'd taken care of her because despite everything, despite the lies and the secrets and the shattered trust, he still loved her. "I don't want a divorce," he heard himself say. Lauren's eyes widened with shock. "Marcus, I don't want a divorce," he repeated more firmly this time. He sat down across from her, pushing the papers aside. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel betrayed and confused and like I don't know who I am anymore. But I don't want to lose you." "How can you say that?" Lauren's voice broke. "I lied to you for 7 years. I've put you in danger. I'm not even really a woman. Not in the way you thought I was." "Stop," Marcus said sharply. "You are a woman. You're Lauren. You're my wife. And yes, you should have told me about your past. And yes, we have a lot to work through. But none of that changes the fact that I love you. I've loved you for 7 years. And that doesn't just disappear because things got complicated." Lauren was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted, "but you're going to get it anyway because that's what marriage is. Forgiving the unforgivable. Loving someone even when they hurt you. Choosing them over and over again. Even when it would be easier to walk away." He reached across the table and took her hand. And this time, when their fingers interlaced, it felt different. More intentional, more honest. "I want to try," he said. "I want us to go to therapy together and work through this. I want to figure out how to trust you again and how to build something better than what we had before. It's going to be hard as hell, but I want to try. Do you?" Lauren nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Marcus stood up and walked around the table, pulling her into his arms. She clung to him like a drowning person, and he held her tight, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. In that moment, all the complexity and pain of their situation crystallized into something simpler. Two people who loved each other, trying to survive the truth. They did go to therapy, every Thursday evening for months. They sat in Dr. Brennan's office and talked through everything. The deception, The fear, the complex layers of identity and disclosure, the trauma they'd both carried into their marriage. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where Marcus had to leave early because his anger overwhelmed him. There were sessions where Lauren broke down completely, convinced that she destroyed everything good in her life. But slowly, painfully, they began to rebuild. Marcus learned about the reality of being transgender in a way he'd never understood before. He learned about the constant fear of violence, the careful calculations about when and how to disclose, the trauma of growing up feeling fundamentally wrong in your own body. He learned about the courage it took for Lauren to transition, to claim her identity despite knowing the cost. And he learned that his anger, while valid, was also wrapped up in his own insecurities and assumptions about gender and identity that he'd never examined before. Lauren learned to be honest in a way she'd never been, even with herself. She confronted the ways her fear had led her to justify deception, to prioritize her own sense of safety over Marcus's right to informed consent. She learned that protecting someone from truth wasn't the same as loving them, and that real intimacy required vulnerability, even when that vulnerability was terrifying. 6 months after that night in the basement, things weren't perfect. They still had hard days. Marcus still sometimes looked at Lauren and felt a flicker of that original shock and betrayal. Lauren still sometimes woke up from nightmares about Thomas Keating or about Marcus leaving or about being exposed and rejected by everyone she knew. But they were trying. They were showing up for each other day after day, choosing the hard work of rebuilding over the easier path of giving up. One evening in April, Marcus was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Lauren came in carrying a large cardboard box. She set it on the table with a meaningful look. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said about how I erased my past. You were right. I've been so focused on being Lauren that I've pretended Lawrence never existed. But he did exist. He was a scared kid who survived a lot of pain to become me. And maybe it's time I made peace with that." She opened the box. Inside were the photographs and documents from the basement. Lawrence in his football uniform. Lawrence at graduation. Lawrence in a hospital bed after his first surgery. All the evidence of a life lived before Lauren. "I want to tell you about him," Lauren said, "about who I was before, about what it was like growing up in that small Georgia town, about all the things I've never talked about, because I was too afraid to let you see that part of me. If we're going to make this work, you need to know all of me, not just the pretty parts." Marcus sat down at the table and Lauren began to talk. She told him about the first time she'd stolen her mother's makeup, about the terror of being caught. She told him about the bullying at school, about learning to make herself small and invisible. She told him about Thomas Keating's assault attempt in the locker room, and about her father's rage when the school called home about the incident. She told him about the years of therapy after moving away, about the first time she took hormones, and cried with relief at finally becoming herself. It took hours. When she finished, the dinner Marcus had been preparing was cold on the stove, and they were both emotionally exhausted, but something had shifted. Marcus felt like he finally understood not just what Lauren was, but who she was, the full complex truth of her, not the curated version she'd presented for 7 years. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting me with this." Lauren wiped her eyes. "I should have trusted you years ago, but I'm trusting you now." They reheated dinner and ate in comfortable silence. And that night when they went to bed, they made love for the first time since the revelation. It was different than before. Slower, more conscious, weighted with everything they now knew about each other. But it was also good, honest, real in a way it had never quite been before. A year after that night in the basement, Marcus and Lauren renewed their vows in a small ceremony in their backyard with only a handful of close friends in attendance. The ceremony was different this time. No pretense, no hidden truths, just two people who'd been through hell and chosen each other. Anyway, Dr. After Brennan officiated and Jake served as best man despite his initial shock when Marcus had finally told him the full story. When it came time for the vows, Lauren spoke first. Marcus, I can't undo the pain I caused by not being honest with you from the beginning, but I can promise that from this day forward, I will always choose truth. Even when it's terrifying, I will always trust you with all of me. The pretty parts and the messy parts, the past and the present. I love you not because you're easy to love, but because you're worth loving. Because you've seen me at my absolute worst and chosen to stay anyway. Because you've taught me that real love isn't about perfection, it's about commitment. Marcus took a shaky breath before speaking his own vows. Lauren, this year has been the hardest of my life, but it's also taught me what I'm made of. It's taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day, especially on the days when that choice feels impossible. I choose you not because of some idealized version of who I thought you were, but because of who you actually are. Courageous and flawed and complicated and real. I promise to keep choosing you, to keep doing the work, to keep showing up even when it's hard. Because you're worth it. We're worth it. They exchanged new rings, simple bands engraved with the date of their second wedding. Not their first, because this was a new beginning, built on a foundation of truth rather than omission. At the small reception afterward, Jake pulled Marcus aside. You know, I didn't get it at first, Jake said, nursing a beer. When you told me everything, I thought you were crazy to stay. I thought that Lauren had betrayed your trust in a way that couldn't be repaired. What changed your mind? Marcus asked. Jake shrugged. Seeing you together, seeing the work you've both put in. My marriage fell apart last year over way less serious, and Sarah and I couldn't even get through 3 therapy sessions without giving up. What you and Lauren are doing, fighting for your relationship this hard, being willing to face uncomfortable truths and grow, that's real. That's worth admiring. Marcus felt a swell of gratitude for his friend's acceptance. Hard one though it had been, one of the hardest parts of the past year had been navigating other people's reactions. The friends who'd pulled away in discomfort. The family members who'd asked invasive questions or made hurtful comments. But the people who truly mattered had stuck around, had done their own work to understand and accept the complex reality of Marcus and Lauren's marriage. That night, after their guests had left, and they'd cleaned up the detritus of celebration, Marcus and Lauren stood in their backyard under a sky full of stars. Lauren leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on top of her head. Are you happy? He asked. Lauren was quiet for a moment, considering. Happy feels like too simple a word for what I am. Grateful maybe, hopeful, terrified that I'll mess this up again, but committed to not letting that fear control me. What about you? Marcus thought about the question seriously. A year ago, his life had been simpler, easier, built on assumptions that had made him comfortable, but had also kept him from truly knowing his wife. Now everything was more complicated, more difficult, but also more honest, more real. Yeah, he said finally, I'm happy. Not in spite of everything that happened, but maybe because of it. Because we survived it. Because we chose to fight for this instead of giving up. They stood together in the darkness. 2 people who'd walked through fire and come out the other side still holding hands. There would be more challenges ahead. Marcus knew that they'd have to navigate questions about disclosure. If they ever adopted children, they'd have to deal with Lauren's ongoing medical needs related to her transition. They'd have to face the inevitable judgment of a world that didn't always understand or accept their relationship. But they'd also have each other, and that Marcus had learned was worth fighting for. Inside the house, the wedding photo from their first ceremony still hung on the hallway wall, slightly crooked. Next to it now hung a photo from today's ceremony. Not a replacement for the past, but an addition to it. Both couples, both versions of their marriage existing together in honest complexity. Lauren had been right about one thing. Coming out and being honest did change how people saw you. But what Marcus had learned was that change wasn't always bad. Sometimes it was just real. Messy and painful and complicated, yes, but real in a way that carefully maintained illusions could never be. As they walked back inside, ready to begin the next chapter of their life together, Marcus felt something settle inside him, not the comfortable certainty he'd had before the revelation, but something deeper. The knowledge that love wasn't about avoiding pain or pretending difficult truths didn't exist. It was about facing those truths together and choosing each other anyway. Over and over again for as long as they both shall live. The blood on the bathroom tile from that October morning had been washed away long ago. The syringe and testosterone vial and mismatched driver's license, all evidence of a past that Lauren had tried to hide, had been carefully preserved and integrated into their shared history. Detective Rothschild had been right to notice those items, right to understand that they told a story. But what she couldn't have known from that crime scene was how the story would end. Not with violence or betrayal or broken vows, but with two people deciding that the truth, however painful, was worth preserving, that love, however tested, was worth fighting for. Marcus and Lauren had found out the hard way that you can't build a life on secrets, but they'd also discovered that truth, once spoken, has a power to heal that lies never could. Their marriage hadn't ended in that basement with a photograph of a teenage boy in a football jersey. It had been reborn there, forged in honesty and watered with tears. And somehow, against all odds, they'd made it through to the other side. Not every story of a husband learning his wife's past ends this way. Some end in pain, abandonment, or broken families. Marcus knew how lucky they were. Their story did not end. It continued with love, choice, and commitment. They chose to face the impossible and grow stronger together. On their bedside table, a simple photo of young Lawrence rests beside their wedding pictures. It reminds them of where they came from and what they survived. People are more than their past, more than their secrets. They are the choices they make, the love they fight for, and the grace they show each other. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the pain, not the past, but the choice to rebuild.